Welcome back. Well, market news now. Asia was in a buoyant mood this morning. Stocks rose as the yuan stabilized while investors expected Beijing to further relax its policies in order to counter the impact of Sino-US trade frictions. Markets extended their rally into a third day, and that's in line with a broad global advance. Hong Kong's Hang Seng ticked up over 0.5% as well. As you can see over there, they're 27,752. The Nikkei moved marginally into the black, while China's Shanghai Composite was the biggest gainer today, rising 1.3% to end the day at 2,733. The major U.S. stock indices rose on Monday as optimism over talks between the United States and China provided a boost to trade-sensitive stocks in the industrial, energy, and material sectors, but stocks pulled off their session highs minutes before the closing bell after US President Donald Trump criticized the Federal Reserve for raising interest rates. The Dow Jones Industrial rose 0.33%, while the S&P 500 gained 0.25%, and the Nasdaq Composite edged slightly higher to 7,821. Well, a lot moving the markets, particularly over the past week. A lot of company news having rolled out, especially today as well. Around 4 companies coming out with earnings, and we'll unpack that in just a moment or two. At the same time, the rand seems to be moving in different directions, but for now, trading around 14 rand and 40 cents odd against the US dollar. With that, let's take a look at how the remainder of the European and local markets are faring. Well, just before we head off onto the JSE there, where we unpack the markets quite strongly, wanted to check in on just how the rand has fared since 1994. Of course, it's quite predominant as the movement in the rand has been topsy-turvy and has certainly weakened right across the years. As you can see, a general upward trend right back on May the 10th, 1994, seeing the rand at 3 rand 60. The ANC comes into power with the election of Nelson Mandela as president. The rand trading, as I said, at 3 rand 60 to the US dollar. Mandela's leadership predominantly about policy more than it is about economics, and of course requiring a lot of stability. December the 20th, 1997, 4 rand 90 against the US dollar. Thabo Mbeki then elected as president of the ANC in order to succeed Nelson Mandela. Mbeki, of course, was a trained economist and was to effect much of the ANC's policy direction predominantly through his command via the deputy president's office, thus relegating Mandela to ceremonial duties. The rand then collapsing and falling a third during Mandela's presidency. June 14th, 1999, 6 rand and 10 cents against the US dollar. A little difficult to see from that graph, but of course a lot happening in those years. Mbeki elected president of South Africa. The effects of the 1997 global financial crisis, which started out in Thailand, begins to then hit South Africa. The rand falls 25% from the time of Mbeki's election as party president. April 14, 2004, 6 rand 60 against the US dollar. Thabo Mbeki re-elected president. Rate of currency weakening slows somewhat, but fell over 8% in Mbeki's first term. The economy sluggish. Industrial jobs from national defense offsets did not materialize at that time as well, particularly the new plan for African development as well, not doing the things that everybody thought it would. And BEE becomes the principal means to transform the South African economy. December 17, 2007, 6 rand 90 against the US dollar there. Jacob Zuma elected president of ANC. Zuma and Mbeki then become political enemies. The rand falls around 5% over the course of Mbeki's second term as president of South Africa. Still, in 2008, September the 20th, 8 rand against the US dollar. Mbeki recalled by what is then a Zuma-led ANC as president of South Africa. The ANC tries to show stability in this region by appointing Kgalema Motlanthe as interim president until the next elections. The rand falls 16% in that time since Zuma's succession to ANC president. 2009, of course, Jacob Zuma elected President of South Africa. Zuma's election sees the rand fall around 5% since Mbeki's recall and 22% during the 18 months since his succession in 2007 to the ANC presidency. Zuma overseeing a 130 billion rand government spend on public infrastructure, of course, which included the World Cup. May 21, 2014, it's around 10 rand 40 or so against the US dollar. President Jacob Zuma re-elected as president of the country. Rand falls 25% during his first term of presidency, but avoids an economic crisis. But despite that, the EFF comes onto the scene. Government starting to hire vigorously as well, trying to curb unemployment. December 18, 2017, not so long ago, 1260 against the US dollar. President Cyril Ramaphosa elected for the ANC as well. Rand loses over half of its value since Zuma took over as president in 2009. His election seemed to show experienced business-friendly skills, which are uniquely able to restore good governance and economic prosperity to South Africa. Of course, that fateful day, February 14th, 2018, ZAR at around 11.80 to the US dollar. What you used to do to them is now done to thee. The precedent that Zuma set, of course, by recalling Mbeki in 2008 is repeated and done to him. The rand strengthens at around 8% between December and February this year. Ramaphosa quickly appointed several new cabinet officials as well. And that initial uptick in confidence that Ramaphosa could transform the economy didn't, however, last. And as we see recent times, the rand falling as much as 14% in June in the period following Ramaphosa becoming SA president, driven a lot by declining political and economic confidence. It's now weakened past 15 rand 40 against the dollar due to a fallout between Turkey and the United States. But that still isn't the highest figure for the rand, which peaked, of course, at the end of around 2016. And that mark is because Jacob Zuma removed Finance Minister then, Nhlanhla Nene, and replaced him with the lesser-known Des van Rooyen, who was then also later replaced by Pravin Gordhan. That is a look at the rand in time. Well, let's unpack the markets for today, however. A lot, of course, happening, and we are joined by Martin Harris from IG. Martin, thank you so much for your time, bud. Welcome to it. It's been an interesting movement for the rand, as I want to talk about that. 14 rand 41 against the US dollar. Turbulent times recently. Today as well, pretty much a sideways movement, if you want to call it that.
Certainly. Thank you for having me, Arabile. What we're seeing in the rand, we see a bit of strength today. Whilst other emerging markets, specifically the Turkish market with the Turkish lira weakening, whilst the rand is slightly strengthening. So we're seeing the rand decouple a bit from the Turkish lira. Previously, we saw that when the Turkish lira was weakening, it was bringing the entire emerging market currency basket down with it. And so what we're seeing now is that international investors are coming back into emerging markets, but are avoiding Turkey specifically. So that has been positive for the South African market in general. They're also seeing investors coming back into South African equities. And, along with positive global markets, we see a positive market in South Africa today as well.
Yeah, a lot of earnings news as well coming out, and that is obviously of key significance. Let's start off with the big one, BHP Billiton. The miners in themselves have come out with a lot of earnings of recent times, and BHP in itself also facing a couple of headwinds. Is this a good time for BHP in terms of the market flow? Have they really done well in this period?
So BHP had a one-off loss where they wrote off a very large asset, they disposed of a very large US shale asset, and so they took a considerable knock on that disposal. Other than that, they're doing okay. Their revenue's up, and they've posted a very large interim dividend, highest that they've ever done. They have, however, they're cautious over the future of commodity prices. They've benefited greatly from very high oil, copper, iron prices, and they are nervous going forward about those near-term prospects on those prices, considering that there are going to potentially be some trade war tensions between US and China, increasing tariffs on those products, forcing the prices down.
Yeah, at the same time, I mean, they're not the only ones who are obviously nervous about prices. We even saw the likes of AngloGold Ashanti, Goldfields as well, showing that in their earnings too. If we move over just to the likes of Imperial as well, Some would say that in this environment, they're sort of sitting in the middle ground here of not knowing where exactly things are going to go, and they have to find their own sort of direction, so to speak, in this market. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, Imperial up 1.5% today. They've posted a somewhat positive set of results, primarily driven by new vehicle sales through their dealership arm. Most of those new vehicle sales, when you do look at the South African stats, are coming from rental agencies renewing their fleets, and so it's often large one-off purchases that happen on a cycle. Other than that, Imperial are very dependent on a strong South African economy, and that is not the case. We have a very weak investor environment, partly as you see why the rand is so weak, because there's just no international money coming in, exchanging dollars for rands, boosting the rand. So Imperial are facing headwinds from a very weak local economy, and we can see that across the board, including with South African gold miners, as you mentioned. They're really stuttering, and we saw some weaker results out from Harmony today too.
Yeah, that's the ones I actually almost forgot there. Harmony, I see them up right behind you as well. So clearly doing relatively well despite the bad news coming out of AngloGold Ashanti and Goldfields.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the difference is that with Harmony, the market was expecting the impairment that we saw in their results today. They've impaired about 5.2 billion rands worth of South African assets. So basically, their South African mines, they've written them down as the future value and what they can receive presently for them. They are a symptom, or the weak conditions are a symptom of a poor environment for gold miners, as we even saw with Goldfields. Their operation at South Deep is running at a loss of 3 million rand per day. They've now sunk 32 billion rands worth into South Deep, whereas Harmony Gold, once you strip out that impairment on their mines, they've made a sort of a revenue of around 700 million rand, and so they're up slightly today. They were up, when I've got them here, they're up 1.3%, trading around 21 rand 45 earlier. And it's really that the sad case of the gold miners is that Harmony are no longer looking to invest any more money in South Africa. Sure. They are only focusing on their offshore assets. They've got an underdeveloped exploration mine based in Papua New Guinea. Sure. That focuses on gold and copper. And so just like the other South African gold miners, they're looking to exit. And probably if the rand gold price, which is currently at about 545,000 rand per kilogram, a lot of these miners are operating at that price. I think Harmony are at around 430,000 rand per kilogram in costs, all in costs. So they operate at a really small profit, and if the rand gold price doesn't improve, they're going to be looking to close or sell off most of their South African assets. Yeah.
Martin, let's quickly talk about Shoprite then as well. That's also a very good company to really measure South Africa's economy. 1.4% down on profits, but still increasing the number of stores and the number of jobs they have as well. One can't read really. Is this good? Is it bad?
Yeah, so the market has taken it quite badly. The share was down almost 7% today, and really what has happened is they've increased sales, typically as a result of they've increased their stores by 143 in the last financial year, but they've decreased their net profit by almost 5%. So their sales are up, profits is down, and it's part of an aggressive expansion sort of strategy that they've approached, but they're losing quite a bit in their north of the border, in the Angolan market in particular. They're paying down a lot of debt there. Interest payments have come due, but they're not operating at nearly at a profit. And it's a symptom, or it's a theme rather, that we see with most retailers operating in continental Africa, where they have very underdeveloped markets, and it's a struggle from a logistics perspective to efficiently operate in those markets. And so Shoprite are taking a brunt with the Angolan market dragging things down, but also locally they would have had to absorb a lot of inflationary costs as well as VAT increases, and so that's where we can see those net profit margins reducing.
Yeah, a lot really happening on that front. I think a lot for that CEO as well to really take on. Martin Harris from IG South Africa unpacking a lot of the earnings results that have come out for South Africa as well. Well, that's a look at your markets for now. That is it for the day. As I said, 14 Rand 41 against the US dollar. That is the state of the Rand for now. Let's take a quick break. Zinga joining you right after this.
Did you know the big hole digging started in 1871 and ended on the 14th August 1914? The hole produced 2,722 kgs of diamonds. However, one diamond as huge as 490 carat of stone found in the open prior 1868